Hey everyone, you're listening to the Simple Electronics podcast, and I'm your host, Dan from the Simple Electronics YouTube channel. And with me today, I've got someone really special. We've got Marius from the Contrary IO YouTube channel. How are you, Marius?
I'm good. However,
However,
I have my own YouTube channel now, and Contrary.io was my former startup.
well, I got it from your Discord profile, so that was my mistake there.
Yeah, that's fine.
What is your YouTube channel? So everyone knows. Mind you, the listeners will have access to it in the show notes and on the background.
Yeah, it's just like my name, which is Marius Heier, and it's probably best to just check the link because it's kind of hard to get through, like to get to English in the proper way.
It's Heier, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I have Marius with me today. Can you explain to everyone a little bit who you are and what you do then, so we get a good sense of you?
Yes, sure. So right now, for most people and probably also your listeners, I'm just someone on the internet that you probably haven't heard about yet. But if I would just like to brand myself with some sort of title, it would be someone who works in public. So I do works within electronics, within machine design, stuff like this. And I publish my work on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. And I've also tried TikTok, but he's fairly new to the game. Started to do that in January, something around that. And I'm currently not so big, but just trying to get there.
Well, I mean,
So,
on YouTube you have 418 subscribers, and it wasn't all that long ago when I was at that pace. But like I said on many podcasts on YouTube, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you get. So hopefully we can drive some audience your way from this podcast.
yeah, that would be nice. Definitely.
So let's start from the very beginning then. First of all, where are you from, and what kind of qualifications do you have to do sort of electronic stuff?
Yeah, good question. Well, I am from Norway, which is in Scandinavia. And
One
I
of the
think
happiest places in the world, I think.
yeah, assumingly. And yeah, I think like the Scandinavian countries usually get this brand, and we have this kind of how should I say, being an example of a society that is very well functioning and working. Usually, especially on the left side of in American politics. But everything is not. How should I say, gold here as well. We
Well,
also
of course.
have our issues, but in general, people are usually not in that much trouble over here.
Let me just ask you a question. If you go outside at night, what are the odds you're going to see the northern lights?
Well, it's actually, I would say it's pretty low. If you travel way up north, which is, so the northern part of Norway is as far away from me as it is from Oslo, or where I am now, to Ukraine.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
like a pretty long country. And we border also with Russia, by the way, in the north.
Yeah, I
And
can see that.
yeah, and we
You
had
guys are
northern
like
lights.
hanging on Sweden's back there.
Exactly. Yeah. We were in union with Sweden until 1905. So we kind of we've been owned by both Sweden and Denmark for some time. So our language is influenced both by that. Our original language is what you speak in Iceland, actually. So that's how they originally spoke in Norway. And then we had our connection, or we belong to Sweden and Denmark, and that influenced the Norwegian language. And we have what we have today, which is some kind of hybrid between Icelandic, Swedish, and Danish, actually.
Very interesting stuff. Is
Yes, it is.
is Norway the I'm sorry, you'll have to correct me here because I live across the ocean, but is Norway the country with all the oil riches that the all the citizens take part in? Or is that
Yeah.
Finland?
No,
It's
no.
Norway.
Yeah, it's Norway. So
Okay,
we
excellent.
have most of our wealth from oil, and we have one of the absolute biggest funds in the world, which is we used to call it the Norwegian Oil Fund, but I think it's kind of has been rebranded as something more. Uh, how should I say? In time, so we kind of
More,
lost the oil,
yeah,
but
more green.
it is oil money, and we own, or like the Norwegian government owns a lot of the biggest companies in the world through that fund, actually.
Interesting. I'm sorry for detracting you there. So you were saying you're in Norway, and
Yeah,
we were
yeah,
talking about your qualifications. I get really excited because I don't get to travel a lot, and especially in these last 2 years. So yeah, whenever I have someone from other countries, it just interests the hell out of me.
yeah, yeah. Of course, of course. Like it's probably pretty similar climate wise to Canada, because I think it's on the same like degree.
Sorta.
Uh,
Yeah, I'm in the south of Canada, and by south I mean not even the southernmost point, but here in Ottawa, specifically where I live, in the winter it gets to -40, and in the summer it gets to +40. So we get those swings.
yep. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you were talking about qualifications, and I would say my original background is I have actually never ever finished any formal education. So you would like someone would probably say that I wouldn't be qualified to do much just based on that. However, like kind of my public education has been within uh, training for being an airplane mechanic, or I think the proper term would be like an airplane engineer.
A man
Uh,
after my own heart. I work on. I'm a licensed automotive mechanic here in Canada.
yep, yep, okay, yeah. So it's pretty much the same. It's just like it's more expensive vehicles.
And I don't have to track down the source of the material that a bolt is made from. You guys
Yeah,
might have to
yeah,
do
yeah,
that.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah, we did a lot of that, and it was a lot of work. And but it was necessary in terms of getting the aviation industry or entire transportation industry to the safety levels of what it is now.
Oh, for
Uh,
sure.
yeah.
So then,
So,
okay, so you're not
yep.
qualified, quote unquote, and I use qualified very loose for the listeners out there because you should never feel like you're underqualified to do anything. Like your qualification to do things is to want to do them. So I'm not bringing Marius down here by saying he's not qualified. It's very air quotes qualified, just to be clear. Um, but but you have so what made you interested in electronics then?
Yeah. Well, I was also sort of playing with your words there, and to kind of like make a point. I think that uh, so if you're an expert in a field, it might be hard to convey knowledge to someone which is not an expert themselves. It's like probably the best textbooks are not written by experts, but people who have just learned it, because like the knowledge is fresh, and the transition phase from knowing something to knowing something, that's kind of like the the best way of learning stuff to others as well.
That's
So
probably true, yeah, and that means that I'm qualified to do my YouTube channel because I know nothing.
exactly. So, and I also think it's quite interesting to, or it might be more attractive for people to know that you not necessarily are like a deep expert in a field, but you are still able to do a lot of stuff. So I would rather be, or usually like used to be measured in like what I'm able to do with the knowledge or little knowledge that I have. Uh, and because I think like that's easier or better for the listener or whoever consumes your content to identify with you rather than if you were like a hardcore expert.
Yeah.
However, I have, so I'm like maybe what you call like a lifelong learner. So I like ever since I was a kid, I just like been reading or listening to books, trying to learn stuff all the time, trying to do many things that I probably shouldn't have done. And it has kind of taken me to a wide range of places and works and stuff like this. But electronics has always been a very special place in my heart. And because when I was in 10th grade, I basically I had done like 10 years of school where I basically, yeah, let's put it this way, like I never fit well in school. But when we started in 10th grade, um, which is the equivalent like high school, we I started on like an electronics school because you needed to do that in order to do your the path to becoming like a airplane mechanic. And that was kind of the first time I started to care about school, and I basically didn't have to read much. I just have to follow up on like what the teacher said, and then I started to do electronics in my spare time, and that is basically how I just like started to care more about school. Um, and I just went from someone which were like below average to someone who was like I usually just like got like B's or A's uh, in electronics, and I've been like going through uh, my whole life kind of being like a below average student, but electronics kind of made sense to me, and yeah, my teacher very not very happy for, that I wanted to become like an airplane mechanic because he always thought that I should like continue within electronics. But I was so set to coming into the special school which you needed to go to if you wanted to become an airplane mechanic. Yeah. Anyways, I returned kind of to the interest of electronics for let's say maybe like 8 years ago or something. So, uh, which kind of also have like a special peculiar story about that as well.
Sure. Let us know. But basically, I also want to tell everyone listening that being a mechanic is not a very singular discipline, and I think Marius can confirm with me here. At least for automotive, you need to have aspects of being an electrician, of being a plumber, of being an HVAC technician, and of being some sort of engineering background. There's all of those systems in vehicles. So I find auto mechanics or mechanics in general are more generalist than a trade like a plumber, for example. I don't know. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It might be a bit different within aviation because you have like speciality fields, but you would probably also have that also within the automotive industry as well. And at least now that things have changed so much with EVs and that sort of stuff, so it probably has, like yeah, like you said, the whole range.
Yeah, it's very. I find, and I also find that the way that it used to work is that people that were not so good in school, they were pushed towards the trades. But I will tell you that working on cars, at least, because that's the only thing I can speak to, is it requires a lot more brain power than you would first assume, especially when you get into the diagnostics of things. So be careful. If you're not an academic, you can still make it, but if you're someone who doesn't like putting a lot of thought into their work, mechanics is probably not for you.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And like the to be a problem solver is really important because things could have a lot of different ways of being fixed.
Absolutely. Or sometimes only one way, but it presents itself in several different ways.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
So then, what did attract you? What did get you started in electronics from the um, aviation mechanic field?
Well, in terms of, I've always been very much into making products ever since I was a kid. I used to go buy soaps from like the store, like a piece of soap. It's like a bar,
Mm-hmm.
and I used to like wrap them with like these fabric bands that I got from my mother, and made them look nice, and I sold them back to the same store for like a profit. I think this was when I was around 8. So I've
Nice.
I've always loved to make products and make things, and with electronics, you had the ability to make things. And I remember kind of our our final project for the year was making an amplifier. And we invested a lot of time and money into that amplifier. And it was like such a great experience because, we just like started with nothing and then we ended up with like a proper professional looking and sounding product. And that was like mind blowing. And I think and then the rest was just like figuring how stuff work and uh, just trying to learn more to be able to do and make more stuff. So I think that's kind of have always been the drive in me, actually. So I've been usually working within development of products for all my life, or I should say like in my professional career. uh, I have a very diverse background of jobs, and I also have actually run like a tuning shop for about 20 years ago, probably something like that.
Sorry, a tuning shop for what? Cars?
Yeah, for cars.
Nice. What kind of stuff were you doing there?
Yeah, so if you so I think it was like around 20 years, and it was around when Fast and the Furious came out. Uh, and I've turned 18 like a couple of years ago. It was in my early 20s, and I really got into this modifying cars. So especially around Japanese cars.
Oh, a man
And
after my own heart. Here it comes.
yeah. So of course, as I do with most things, I usually take things to the extremes. So while the other kids were like trying to buy stuff from, from the States or whatever, I called up the Japanese factory or brand called Trust, which was the kind of like the one of the biggest brands behind the Japanese tuning scene. And they kind of delivered a lot of stuff like to the Fast and Furious movie and all that stuff. And I asked to be the sole importer for their products in Scandinavia. So that's kind of where it started. And we started to import exhaust systems, intercoolers, a bunch of electronics, and this kind of stuff.
So, Trust is the company behind Greddy. Or
Yeah,
vice
exactly.
versa. I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah, so Trust just had Greddy as their brand, right, in the States.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I just started to import the stuff. I I got to know someone who was like a car mechanic who also wanted to join, and we spent basically all his savings to buy parts, and we managed to get a really, really good air freight deal with the company. So we air freighted the stuff in, and we just sold it here in Norway, and to Sweden even. And everyone were super excited around this car tuning scene around then. And so that was like a really exciting, cool thing to be doing as an early 20-year-old. I also went to to Tokyo for something called the Tokyo Auto Salon, which was like the coolest tuning expo kind of in the world. And that was when I met the the people behind the factory, and they were like super surprised that I was so young, because usually, you were in college or something when you were that age in Japan. But they kind of like dealt with it, and because we were buying a lot of stuff, and it was like really really exciting. We got to see their factory. The owner of Trust owned a bunch of like racing Porsches. So like these the Daewoo 917 Porsches from Le Mans and stuff like that. And they had obviously their factories where they kind of made everything. So it was like super super interesting to do. So that was kind of like my first. Yeah, we didn't call it startup back then. We just called it like a company.
Yeah, startup is like the new trendy words, right?
Yeah. That came a bit later, but we ran that shop for, let's say, like 3 years or something.
Okay.
And we had like our biggest problems were the costs of importing everything, because we had to buy stuff, and because we didn't have any credit or anything like this. So just bought a bunch of stuff, and then we basically sold it. And the more we bought, like the more in trouble we had with liquidity. And there were like no bank that would loan young people money, at least back then. So we figured out that. So we actually also like imported some movies, or not movies, or video productions of from the cartooning scene, which actually was manufactured in or filmed in New Zealand, which was quite popular, called High Octane. And we basically pivoted the entire car tuning shop into selling and distribution of these car videos, which also were really fun. And we actually even got the entire production team from New Zealand up to Norway, and we kind of made our own tuning movie with them. Which was super cool, because we got to like make like a semi-professional production. And I think I got my name as a co-producer in like IMDb for that, which kind
That's
of been like
incredible.
a party joke, but it was still fun. But we did lots of cool stuff. Like we went to Germany to ride on the Autobahn with like 1,000 horsepower Toyota Supra. We did like a top speed run on like an airstrip in Denmark with some insane cars. So it was really, really cool. And especially when you are like in your mid-20s, so it was really, really a fun time.
I have to tell you though, you're making me. I'm 34. You're making me feel very unaccomplished now. And we haven't even passed your 20s yet.
Yeah, don't worry. Yeah, I'm just like telling the story 20 years after, so I only remember the good parts right now.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and then I kind of, we needed some more videos to sell, right? Because we only had like 4 or 5 videos that we could sell. And so you remember the American Chopper series from the Discovery Channel?
Yep, used to watch that pretty regularly.
Yeah. So I was obviously interested in that as well. So I thought like, hey, I could just like call up Discovery Channel and see if it's possible to get the distribution rights for that as well. And they basically invited me down to Munich and they also invited me to like you have the Cannes Film Festival, but then you also have the documentary film festival. So they invited me down there to do negotiations about getting the rights for American Chopper. series from the Discovery Channel and sell it in Scandinavia. And we actually snatched the rights for the series right in front of like one of the very big distributors in Norway back then, which was fun. But it was because we had like this niche car market, so we knew a lot about distributing these kind of DVDs. So that was kind of how should I say, like a third pivot. So we went into not only just like buying DVDs, but we've also produced them from like raw masters and that kind of stuff. So it was all about videos and that stuff for a while. It was quite a fun time that as well, with lots of crazy stories from like meeting so within the documentary space. And especially back then, we had like we also got Mythbusters, by the way, which was fun.
The distribution rights, or did you get to meet
Yeah,
them
yeah.
too?
No, we didn't get to meet them. It wasn't Discovery that actually owned those rights, so we just got them for someone else, like the production company.
Okay.
But we managed to sell those as well. But this was also kind of in the period where like DVDs were really dying. And suddenly, up to one point, we had a day where like 3 of the absolutely biggest distributors in Norway went bankrupt at the same time. And we basically just had to shut down our company because like the market was basically just gone, like almost overnight, because all of the big distributors had to downwrite the value of their stock houses, and that kind of like pulled the plug on the entire DVD market in Norway, and with us with it.
Wow.
And yeah, and also when I started that tuning shop, I also started like a automotive car forum in Norway, which grew to be the biggest one in Norway. And I actually owned it for like 20 years. I sold it last year, actually. But that was kind of like my full-time job after I've done the DVD video production thing. And then I got kids and everything, and I thought like, okay, I can't be like a founder anymore. I have to get like a proper job. And I went looking for like a proper job, as my mother would tell me. That was like back in 2012 or something. And I basically was pulled into uh, a small company that was owned by the biggest energy company in Norway. And I got the role of being, I think you called it like webmaster back then,
Okay.
which were like you had, my job was to take care of like the web pages and stuff like that, because I've been doing a lot of web development and stuff with the car forum thing that I was running. And this was kind of like my first professional job, which is now, let's say, 10 years ago, which was kind of interesting. and I got to, I worked there for a couple of years, and I actually became the CEO after 2 or 3 years of that company.
Geez, are you just getting lucky, or are you that skilled? What are we looking at here?
Well, I think I'm pretty good at doing stuff that I'm not supposed to do. I'm not sure.
I mean, fair enough.
So, and I think it's also like I usually end up in a lot of weird situations. So, like this company that I was working for had been running with like a negative surplus. Is probably a different way to say that, but we
Deficit, yeah.
basically, yeah, with a deficit. So we had we lost, or the company lost, between $300,000 to $500,000 a year for 10 years of basically botched development of different digital products. And suddenly, like the management of the big energy company said, like, you need to stop this, because it's like you're just losing a bunch of money all the time. But we were securing a lot of customers for the energy company because what we were doing was that we were actually involved with uh, real estate agents to we basically gave them free software that they would use in their real estate margin or market, and they would give us electricity customers when you were moving, right? So I became CEO after we had like this really big cut down in the company, and like 80% were fired. They let the CEO go, and I was kind of like the one that reached out my hands and like, hey, yeah, sure, I can, I'll take it. And I basically focused up, on just developing our own digital products. We made a bunch of new products, and we managed to turn the company around after like 16 months by putting development in house. And so like after 16 months after I became the CEO, we managed to turn it around, and we delivered like a 160,000 something like that, a surplus, which was pretty good for the company because we had like been losing money for like 10 years.
So now are like companies like Microsoft knocking on your door saying, "Hey, come work for us. You can be you could work on our board of directors." Is that how that works?
Well, not really. But what happened was that the company that owned us, which was like this big energy company, they started to notice like, how are you able to do all this stuff with so little money? And I got more and more into like their innovation department within energy distribution, which is like selling electricity. And eventually I did like a project where were like developing a new energy company, and we had like the mantra was like, how cheap or how small can you make a new energy company? And the day that we were going to present that to the executive team, which were like a big thing for us, they never showed up, and we were just like let down. And we later figured out the reason, and the reason was that a bigger European energy company had just bought our owner. So a giant Finnish energy company just bought the company, and we never ever get to present our super sleek, trimmed down version of an energy company, because then everything went into this strategic nightmare and all these legal issues and stuff. Because like when you have the biggest energy company in Norway being bought by one of the biggest energy companies in in Europe, it's kind of a big deal. And but eventually I got picked up by this new company that actually bought us. This company is called Fortum, and it's a really, really big European energy companies. And they operate around 150 power plants, and 12 of them are in Russia. So they run like nuclear plants for Russia in the Ural Mountains. So this was a special company to work for, and I ended up doing having several roles there, because I was like gotten to know like the person who are able to get stuff done for little money. uh, and yeah, so that was a fun time. I left my CEO job at the old company. I came into this new company that I've just bought us, and I had some really weird and fun experiences there. And it's like the company that I work for were like they're so big that their business are kind of like their country's national security matters, right? Because like when you it's owned by a Finnish company, and Finland has their main border with Russia, and we had permission to run nuclear power plants for Russia, and So it was an exciting job, and at some point I were actually an advisor to the executive team of this company. Like we visited like Russian startups and stuff like that, in terms of like if we were to acquire them or to invest in them. I was advising their venture capital team, and I ended up finally inheriting their digital product, which was similar to the one that I got canceled, which was how small can you make an energy company. So
Interesting.
and we ended up starting a new energy company in Denmark, actually, and we did like a corporate startup, and that is kind of where I got entangled with electronics again, because one of the things that I wanted to do, because I ended up being a not a product manager, but like an executive uh, head of product. I think my title was something like that.
Okay.
And what I wanted to do was that in Norwegian and Danish and like millions of energy metering smart meters, you had the possibility to hook up some device and just like read serial data from it. And what I wanted to do was develop our own piece of hardware so we could get real time data out of the power meters.
Sort of like via like 3G or like a cell network, basically.
Um, just through internet. So
Okay.
yeah, so that was kind of like one of the main driving ideas for our new energy company that we made in Denmark. But our owner did really not want to do hardware because they had just shut down like a 100 million euro thing, which they tried to do hardware, and they didn't want to start something new with hardware. So me and another person from that team decided to quit the big company and just like start our own and start to develop this piece of hardware that we wanted. And that was kind of how I got back into electronics.
Did you end up developing it and selling it for millions of dollars? So now you can join my Patreon for $2 a month, or not really?
No, not really.
Well, I was hopeful for both of us.
Yeah. So I got actually it started a bit before that in terms of like getting back into electronics. So the company that I used to work for, which I was the CEO for, we lost a very, very big client, which was like 50% of our business. And we lost that to a competitor. And the competitor hired half of my company to do data entry for them. So as the CEO, I had like a really big problem. And that was like, I need to process 30,000 handwritten piece of paper with half of my staff.
Oh,
And
wow.
what I did was just like, okay, so, and I obviously couldn't ask for more money for like, we just couldn't get more money from the company. I think like most of those people were like hoping we were going to fail. But what I basically ended up doing, which this probably sounds crazy, but I basically started to do like Udemy courses on computer vision and started to learn Python. And I just together with like the one developer that we had full time, we managed to create like a service that could do optical character recognition through just some very very basic Python knowledge. So that was kind of like my introduction to programming, was to make this customer service or data entry piece of a code. So everything was like purely written in Python by me, who has basically only taken Udemy courses, but it worked. It worked enough, so we kind of got our head above the water, and I got to learn some programming. And because I then knew Python, I bumped into MicroPython on microcontrollers, and that's kind of where I got into electronics again. And to me, it was like absolutely mind blowing that I could code hardware with Python. And I just like remember, even it was probably some like a blinky thing or whatever that I tried first. But like when I flashed the first ESP8266 with MicroPython, I just like started to breadboarding. I felt like, oh, I could probably just like make anything with this. So I think like that was how I got into electronics again. And that ended up being like giving me motivation to try to develop this piece of hardware that would read off power meters. Turns out that our startup, or this specific idea of reading um, data from the power meter, was actually extremely hard. It wasn't hard because it was the reason why it was very hard was that the energy that we could consume to run our device was, I think, like 6 milliamps of 24 volts, right?
Okay.
And it was like impossible to just like run a microcontroller with Wi-Fi on that. So like this product became like very complex, because like we have to include like a supercapacitor, because we really did not want to have an external power supply, because if we would add an external power supply, like a certified electrician had to come to your fuse box, and here in Norway you probably would need to pay like an electrician, let's say between $500 to $1,000 to do that, because it's like everything here is so expensive. So we really did not want to do that. So this thing of developing this simple product turned out to be very hard. And it turned out that we need to do a lot of prototyping to be able to do this. And we did not have a lot of money, so we were very creative in terms of how we were making prototypes. So we didn't even order PCBs, stuff like that, from the cheap Chinese companies, stuff like that. We just like milled all our prototypes on a custom CNC mill that we made, and it we got like more and more interested in like the developing electronics rather than just the simple product. So I got into like, okay, so these machines that we build, they're pretty interesting. Maybe we should focus more on these machines instead of just like that's very say a simple product. And then COVID hit, and all that stuff, and semiconductor crisis, and like it's trying to start a startup in the middle of that nightmare was like extremely hard. And after a couple of years, we kind of gave up, and the my co-founder, she was in another place in her life where she kind of like wanted to get a house, and not to do a startup. So we basically decided to shut it down.
Well, that's pretty sad. Is that the Contrary IO? Is that the one that
Yeah, yeah,
just got shut down? Oh, okay. I
yeah.
see what's going on. Well, that's unfortunate. But okay, so how about because I do see that you have some quite interesting projects on your YouTube channel, and I saw some cool stuff on your Twitter. How about some personal projects then? Can you pick one or two that you're really proud of and talk to us about those?
Yeah, definitely. So I've done a lot of stuff, and so what I'm basically doing like right now is I'm trying to figure out a way to be able to just like work publicly with the stuff that I'm interested in and share the work I do. And hopefully, other people will, kind of just try to follow the mantra to, make things that I like, and then find people who are similar to me. And then instead of selling this to them, I'm just sharing with them for free. And then I've set up the possibility to, donate money through Patreon and stuff like that. And the very specific thing, something that I worked on for quite some time, has been the process of applying solder paste to boards. So I built several machines in order to do that, and over a very long development phase, I have kind of like tried to simplify and drive down the cost and complexity of this entire process to basically ended up with a really small 3D printed vacuum plastic box, which you can see on my YouTube channel. And it's just like a different way of applying solder paste, instead of using, the good old taping it to the table and that sort of stuff. And that's like probably it's been like a very long continuous process, and I ended up like sharing a video, like a 1 minute video on Twitter for that, and it got like 10,000 views or something overnight, which was pretty crazy.
Let me just explain it for the people who haven't seen the video, but they should
Yeah.
definitely go check it out. But it's basically like a 3D printed sort of box with like a grate on the very top, that you drop your PCB in, and then you put your stencil. Usually it's a piece of stainless steel stencil on top, and you connect your vacuum cleaner to the bottom. And then when you turn on your vacuum cleaner, it basically, there's a compliant mechanism inside that pulls the PCB and the stencil into like perfectly flat, and it holds it there while you can apply your solder paste, which is, it's really ingenious idea.
Yeah, it's a quite simple idea, but it's I also shared a video of like a machine I built a year ago or something, which is like an open. It's based on the open builds aluminium extrusions, and it's basically a copy of how like a professional machine works, but it's made with the open source extrusions, and that was kind of the first version of the box. But everything has just like been simplified all along, because I wanted to figure out, because like most people can't have a 6-axis machine, which is the size of a solder stencil. So let's say that it would cover your entire like normal working bench. Most people can't have that. And then I went to, and also that used framed stencils, which is pretty big. And I wanted to make a machine that could use frameless stencils, because then you could use solder stencils, which is like 100 by 100 millimeters instead of 400 by 300 millimeters. And
It's a foot and a half by a foot for those of you in Libya,
yeah.
America, and one more. I don't remember what the last one is. I love that joke. But anyways, yes.
Yeah, and then I made a smaller machine, and in order to align the stencil onto the circuit board, the unexpected maker, for those who know him, and because we have kind of been pushing ideas back and forth, he was like, "Yeah, what about using like a vacuum bed?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, that could work." But he was thinking of like a vacuum bed that you would have on like a CNC, which like with a proper vacuum motor. The problem is that you would need to have like a totally enclosed system, unless you have like a very big vacuum motor, which is like really, really expensive. So I was like, okay, what about just using a vacuum cleaner? It's like something everyone has, and it has like very high CFM, or like, throughput. So even if your box is not airtight, it's still going to work. And I basically figured out, hey, now that I have this vacuum box, I don't actually need the machine at all. If I could find a way to lift the sensor. So I started to experiment with different springs. I 3D printed a ton of springs. I've always just tried to, how should I say, just like go one step at a time. So it's just like, okay, I figured out how to make a 3D printed spring, and then I probably made like 20 springs. And then, okay, let's put it in the box, and then let's make a lifting mechanism. And I've been iterating like this for some time. And I basically ended up with what is today, which is, yeah, a simple box. Everything is 3D printed, and it works. It works pretty good. If you are, have been doing and making electronics for a long time, you'll probably get the same results with like the taping down technique. But that thing has like never been a good thing for me, so that's why I like this box instead.
I finally got my first PCB made with a solder stencil, and so I did my first, reflow soldering with a hot plate last week or the week before, and I think the vacuum would have been nice because the thing is, for those listening, when you use the tape down method, you kind of use your spare PCBs as shims because they're the right height, right? So it would be nice to have some sort of this vacuum solution, right? So that you only need to use the PCB you're soldering onto. So it is solving a problem.
Yeah, yeah. And I have like, so my overall plan is, or what I hope to do is just to, try to get more people interested in electronics, because I think that electronics is like a, it's something that countries go to war over, when it comes to semiconductors, because you can do really powerful stuff with it. And what I would like to be able to do is make, more people able to create electronics, because you don't necessarily need to know a lot about electronics in order to make them, because you could basically just be following a recipe.
Yep.
So something that I find very interesting is to try to decouple the product creator from the manufacturing process. So if you would compare it to something like 3D printing, right? So you have a bunch of people that make a lot of 3D printable stuff. They share it, and then people just take those digital instructions, put them into their machine in their 3D printer, and they end up having a product. And this is basically the same, at least from the high level, with electronics. So if people had the ability to assemble or make electronics closer to home or in their home, you could have a space where you have electronics product creators creating product for, how should I say, like an open manufacturing process, which you basically just have at home. And it's probably not for everyone, but everything which turns out to be big usually have to start with some really small enthusiasts. And I really think like this is something, really really exciting, and it's really that kind of drives me to do this stuff as some kind of like, yeah, how should I say, like a drive to try to do that, because I think that if more people are able to produce stuff, more people are able to sell stuff or just keep it for themselves, and the more people are dependent on each other in terms of market mechanisms and stuff like that, the more people have the ability to make money and earn a living without having how should I say, a normal job and stuff like that. So that's kind of like the high level description of what's kind of driving me at the core. So that's kind of like I've tried to follow this kind of plan. I've started with I made, for our startup, I think I've made like over 150 different like, circuit-based products. But I kind of like went in terms of launching my YouTube channel. I kind of went back to basic and did something really basic, and that was to develop a really simple circuit board that will give USB-C to the PlayStation 4 controller. Because as a PCB project, it's a pretty simple project. It costs very little money. So what I did was that I created a circuit board which other people could order at, for example, JLC PCB, and they would just like take my Gerber file and they could just like order products from the factory in China. And I made a few videos around how I made the circuit board, and I probably made like 4 or 5 videos around the PS4 controller and USB-C, because I want to try to tap into like a special, a problem or a subject within YouTube, right? And I went to all of the USB-C conversion videos, and I like mentioned my projects and my videos in those comments, and that's kind of where I have gotten the most source of traffic from with YouTube. And there's like I have a Discord, and I have people there for some are like very young, and they have ordered some of the or like the PCB that I made, and that's super. I think that's super cool. And then you have people who real not necessarily are into electronics from the start, but they kind of come in through this window of this simple circuit board with USB-C for the PlayStation 4 controller. And they start to see the video and is like, I think I can also do that. Some of them want to build the PCB themselves. Some of them obviously think like, maybe I could sell that like to my friends. And that's basically the most valuable experience I got out of my startup. It was that, I was actually able to make electronics at home, or at least assemble it. And other people are probably able to do that as well. But most people are, they don't think that they're able to make electronics, like because they don't know too much about electronics, right? But that's also kind of like why I wanted to have a bit of a different angle than most people or YouTubers that does electronics, because they usually like do a ESP32 project or stuff like this. But I just like wanted to tap into a source of people who were kind of like new to this and give them the same experience I had when running my startup, and then basically just like start to drag them through, but like the next thing. And I was like, okay, you can order this board now, and you pay like $4 for the board, but if you assemble it yourself, you can make it for $1. And then most people are like, yeah, but there's no way I can assemble, a circuit board. And then, I'm planning to make videos on, this is how you can assemble and make circuit boards, with a basic $10 hot plate, and trying to just like show people what you actually can do. Because it's it's very hard for people to imagine what the next thing is if you are kind of like more than one step ahead, right? So if you tell people that you could manufacture electronics at home, and that's just going to change everything, most people are going to be like, yeah, that's not happening. Like, I don't have a steady hand. I can't pick and place stuff with like with the tweezers. And I'm like, yep, that's true, but we could also make a very simple pick and place machine to do this. And then people start to like, yeah, that might be true, that might be interesting. And that's kind of like how I try to guide people through to see what I've seen, basically. And uh, yeah, and I've talked with like several so this is like obviously something that I learned a lot through the startup. And one of the reasons why also I choose not to go and try and raise money, because the most interesting stuff wasn't to try to create like a venture capital investment vehicle, but it was to try to share this knowledge of creating electronics at home for a very low cost, and not necessarily try to make that into the biggest company, right, or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I try to do something similar in my YouTube channel. Like, I have sponsorship with PCBWay, as a lot of my viewers would know. But I go out of my way to make circuit boards that are fun. Either they solve a problem or they're fun to build, right? To try to get as much people in as possible. I mean, I've made a discrete motor driver, like an H-bridge motor driver, because if you're interested in electronics, the odds that you have a couple of transistors, a couple of resistors, and some stuff like that on hand are pretty high. So you could order these boards from wherever you want. I always allow the downloading of the Gerbers, and they can, buy this from wherever they want, and they probably have the parts at home to build it, which I think is the important part, right? Electronics shouldn't be expensive. It should be fun. It should be educational. It doesn't have to be expensive.
Yeah, exactly. Let me ask you a question. When you make these boards and share them, what kind of responsibility do you feel in terms of like, how it works and stuff like that? Do you see it as a product, or do you just see it as you sharing some work, and the responsibility is on the person who take that file and orders it?
I guess I'm not sure what you mean by responsibility,
So
per se.
let's say that the board that you made was creating a lot of EMI, or it was made in a way that it could caught fire or something like that. I'm just like trying to come up with a scenario where basically someone would complain about your design, if you know what I mean.
Oh, I would say, yeah, I would say, in that case, I would say it's their responsibility, because you kind of get what you pay for. Like, I put it together. I've been using it. It didn't catch fire for me. So if it caught fire for you, maybe you need to reevaluate how you put it together, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like this is a quite interesting a concept in terms of like when we talk about products in the at least in the Western world, like products that we buy uh, are they need to be in a special way. There is a lot of responsibility on the person who actually sells a product, right?
Hmm.
And if you go to China, for example, that thing is quite different, like culturally, because you can buy a lot of stuff on AliExpress that not necessarily is to the quality standards that we use in the West. However, um, all of these compliance stuff and responsibility that we put on the product creator is probably also a very limited in terms of how many products that we are able to create like in the West. So I think that Just by sharing the work you do uh, is like something like a new way of actually, giving or making products. People probably not think of it like that, but I think it's like it's super exciting and yeah.
Yeah, and I think there would be a difference too if I was creating a product with the intention to sell. In that case, I would be taking more responsibility on. I would want to make sure it's fairly bulletproof, but you'd still have to follow instructions, obviously. Um, but other than that, if it's like a project of mine and you want to try it out for yourself, then I think the responsibility does lie on you, because especially since when I publish videos, you can see it working, like it
Yeah,
clearly works, right?
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of also been the way I'm thinking about it. So I make a board, and I'll share the tests that I do with it, and like, hey, this is how it works for me. So you can expect it to work the same for you, right? Uh, and because like uh, if we do things like this, because uh, for someone who has done like a hardware startup, most of the hard parts is not creating the products. It's not doing the electronics. It's everything else, right? It's like sales, marketing, distribution, um, you know, uh, getting your product legal and stuff like that. So um, just by sharing the stuff you do, you're able to produce a lot of more different products than you are if you just want like to sell them professionally. So and this is kind of like aligning with the thinking that I wanted to just create stuff I think is interesting and then just share it with people, and then people would take the responsibility uh, to to try that, and they should obviously expect the same result unless they would mess it up. But just think about how many more products you would be able to get access to if you took more responsibility yourself when you acquire them. So instead of buying products that are from produced through like a Western manufacturing standard, think about all the products you get access to through AliExpress or through just like ordering copies of Gerber files.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's the same thing when I take someone else's projects into my own hands. Like if it doesn't work, that's my responsibility. And I might reach out to the creator and see if they have any ideas, but they don't owe me anything. I'm using their work, like they're allowing me to use their work, but I'm basically using their work for free.
Hmm.
And so if they would say, I'm sorry, I don't have time to answer your questions, that's fair enough because I
Yep.
didn't pay you anything for it.
Yeah.
The
Exactly.
dynamic changes if I pay, right? If someone buys something off of me, I would feel compelled to offer support. I,
Yeah.
I don't think I don't think anybody I don't think everybody should assume that they need to support their products, especially if they say this is offered without support. But I'm saying me personally, then I would feel compelled, like I should be offering support.
Yeah. Exactly. And that also makes you as a product creator be able to create a lot more products
Yeah,
because you don't have to do the other part. And that's something which I find very interesting, and especially around content creation. So you could also just consider electronics or making recipes for this, or the digital instructions for creating the circuit board or the pick and place process to be content. Not this, and you could be like a content creator as a product developer, and that's something that I think is going to be really interesting to see in the future, because products that are usually developed either as open source products usually just tend to be better and better all the time, and products which are made through a mass manufacturing process are usually not as good because they need to do a lot of stuff in order to mitigate risk, right? So you could be more bold when you just share your product files, uh, and instead of running through the whole mass manufacturing or normal work chain that we have. So I think
Yeah.
that's super interesting.
And I think that's something that is going to have to be clarified as we move towards a world that is more open to right to repair. Is I have zero, and I mean zero issues at all of a company saying, here's the diagrams, here's the replacement parts. But if you open this tool up or this product up and make your own modifications, we are not responsible for what happens. I am totally fine with that, but I would I would much rather that than the current status quo of you can't buy replacement parts, you can't fix your own stuff, and we're still not responsible. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. But that's also probably like a result of like a hyper optimized value chain uh, from a marketplace which is dominant by very few companies. That are able to actually do it like this.
Yeah.
And
Oh, for sure.
but it's also a bit special. Like it's basically robots that makes these parts, and sometimes it's probably cheaper to just like make something new than to just replace a simple thing. However, it's really not a good thing that they actively try to shut down people actually wanted to make business out of fixing stuff instead of just by buying new stuff all the time.
Oh, exactly. I agree. Hey, we're actually at just over an hour, and I have a question I ask every single one of my guests. Do you mind if I throw you that question?
Sure, sure.
All right. So the setup is you get a government grant. I guess your government has more money than my government, so this could be true. For you to start the business of your dreams, it does not have to be profitable, but it does have to provide a service or a product. What kind of business do you start?
I think I would just do what I do now.
Yeah, so you would make like you would turn what you do now into like some sort of pro outfit where you actually make money instead of instead of making a loss.
Well, I think I'm pretty. So I think that uh, the option for making money will usually turn up where you have problems to fix. So I think that the opportunity for making money in like this space, which I'm trying to do, will maybe show up later. There are like some very obvious things, which is having deals with PCB way or manufacturing like this, like commissions. But yeah, I think I would just like have if it was 10 years ago, I would probably have just tried to make a normal company. But I think I'm more now into trying to create networks instead of corporations, and a network could be like a YouTube channel or something like that. So yeah, I think I would just like to do what I do, but on government funding.
So speaking of doing what you do, we're gonna have to end it here. But I'd like you to tell the people listening where to go find you, what they should check out, and maybe tell them a video they should really look at.
I think you should, if you haven't already, go check out the vacuum solder stencil box. It has such a long name that I keep forgetting what the name is all the time. Because that's pretty interesting, and that's something that I've worked on for quite some time. I even made a very clickbaity thumbnail for that, which is not necessarily turning out to work. So maybe, but you probably know what I mean. So check me out on YouTube. I'm also on Twitter and on Instagram, but I mainly post long form content, or not as long as a podcast, but shorter than, should I say, like TikTok format on over at YouTube. So go check out my YouTube channel and just go from there. I also stream a lot on Twitch, which I find to be super cool. So you can also follow me at Twitch, and maybe you can put some links in the description there for that.
Yep. All the links will be in either the show notes if you're listening to the audio version or the description if you're listening on YouTube. And so you guys, you really need to go check out his stuff. Check out a couple of videos. You'll know for sure that this is the kind of things you want to see. Then hit that subscribe button. It always helps us. And so Marius, thank you so much for joining me today, taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with me.
No problem. Thanks for letting me on.
All right. And you viewers, you better be going on to his socials and hitting subscribe, and on Twitch, give him a follow. That makes a big difference for Twitch streamers as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you all in the next one.